Hey everybody, welcome to the ReCoop. I'm Cooper Daniels, and I'm a guy that knows a little about a lot. And today we're talking to Michael Cotton. He is the co-founder of Algomint and the founder of Meld Gold. How you doing, Michael?
Good, Coop. How are you, mate? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we talked briefly at Algo Fest. I had such a good time. And
likewise.
Yeah. And so, look, we had Decipher recently, and for anybody that might not know who you are, many people in the Algorand ecosystem obviously do, but hopefully I have a wider audience than that. So maybe you could just give us a quick breakdown on you and what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. So where to start is always a good question, but it came to the Algorand ecosystem, pretty much day one of mainnet launch. Which was really exciting. I think for me, we just loved the tech, met the team, loved the team, and really committed ourselves to, okay, this is where we're going to make a home and really start to focus all our energy on building out inside the Algorand ecosystem and helping the Algorand ecosystem itself grow. What that led on to is the first company, which was Meld Gold, which is majority actually traditional ecosystem. And then the end of that life cycle of that ecosystem is to digitize. Which the thinking is at the moment, 99% is traditional ecosystem, 1% is digital, and that will slowly shift over time. So we've really built the rails and built the capability to shift that ecosystem from more traditional to digital through these rails. And then what that really led on to for us was AJ, my business partner, and I are, a long time, both entrepreneurs, investors, have a venture background. And we really started to understand that, hey, we need to do more than what we're doing in Algorand. If number one, we really want to help, but also we had this incredible opportunity of being one of the people who understood the value of Algorand early. So we really then set out establishing Meld Ventures, which was a venture capital company, or a venture lab, as I like to call it. And the focus of that was investing, incubating, accelerating, building the things that are missing in the ecosystem by identifying the gaps, or identifying the opportunity that wasn't necessarily a gap, but was an interesting opportunity to layer on top of the tech. And we've spent the last 2 years focusing on exactly that. Almost 25 projects in Algorand now in total. So we've had a really strong focus in the space. We have invested outside Algorand as well, but that's almost always, it has always been with the idea of, number one, if we invest in you and you're outside Algorand, we're probably going to annoy you about Algorand. We are upfront with it, so it's not a case of like it's a sneaky the day later after we send the money. We're like, all right, prepare yourself. We do tell them up front, and generally we try to make sure it's something that they are interested and open to, and we think it's a good product to come to Algorand as well. We've had success with that already. So we've had one come across. And we've had another that looks like it will as well. Both incredible projects out of Ethereum that make a huge amount of sense in Algorand.
Sorry, just real quick, which one did make its way over from Ethereum so far?
So D-Hedge, which is called Prismatic on Algorand. So Natalie, who's brilliant, incredible founder, brilliant businesswoman, just a huge asset to come to Algorand. So it's a really great example. And the brilliant part about Algorand is it opens up so much opportunity to do a lot with that product. So that's going to be really exciting. The second one I can't mention yet because I'm sure I will get in trouble because it's not set in stone. But I'm pretty confident.
Looking good. Yeah.
It's looking good. It's looking good, and it's one of the best founders that I know out of Ethereum. Just a brilliant team that do incredible work. So getting them across will be a great win. So, and we're 95% of the way there. So I think that'll be really exciting.
Nice. So, okay, I want to talk about Meld more and obviously Algomint, because there's a lot of exciting things happening there. But in the Algorand land or whatever, we just had an exciting week. We're having an exciting week. We had Decipher earlier this week. It's Thursday. I'll put this out, or it's Friday for you, Thursday for me. I'll put this out on Friday, over here. And but 2 days ago, Decipher ended. Do you have any takeaways from Decipher? You spoke on DAOs, which unfortunately I missed, but I noticed that you were speaking about DAOs. And so, any kind of takeaways from Decipher, what you're thinking, how you're feeling after it?
Yeah, look, I think there was some great stuff to come out. The Hivemind announcement, I think, was brilliant. I think that was really great news. I actually really love the mayor taking, 1 out of 2 paychecks in Algo, I thought was really cool.
I thought that was fun.
Again, Hivemind was great. Borderless
Mhm.
Capital's announcement of the $500 million fund.
Yeah.
I also think, which is actually brilliant, if we sort of dig into that for one sec, like what I think people also need to understand is one, Borderless is a dynamic business. David and Arul and the team are diehard Algorand fans and great guys to work with. I think they also, it's not going to be as if that 500 mil equals 500 mil TVL. They will work that capital through the ecosystem. So whether that bridges through Algomint, goes on to folks finance and gets a loan, then comes across to be into Prismatic with the funds that they borrow, that then deploys them as an LP into one of the DEXs, you'll actually see this multiplier of that TVL. So I think, when you see David and Arul talk about getting to like a 10 bill val on Algorand, that 500 mil actually is quite a big step towards that if deployed properly.
Right.
So I think, it's a good thing to keep in mind that 500 mil capital doesn't mean 500 mil TVL. It more likely means $1 to $2 billion. And the bill sounds very like low key for billion. It's actually a lot of money. I don't mean to make it too trivial.
Yeah, I know. Well, money just also just like, we printed $5 trillion. It's just all starting to lose its punch.
Its meaning, right?
Yeah.
So look, I think that was a really, really interesting piece of the puzzle of what came out of Decipher. But also I think the talk of state proofs was kind of underplayed a little bit. State proofs is such a huge leap in tech. There's some other things that are coming on the tech side that is super interesting.
Can you break down real quick? Because I watched that talk on state proofs and I sort of understand, and I haven't been talking about it because I want to better understand what that really even means, because it sure sounded exciting when I heard what these, like Adi and these guys talk about all of this. So what exactly is a state proof?
Yeah. So look, the simple description is line of sight through chain. So, the ability to be sitting on Algorand and see what's happening on Ethereum or vice versa.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bridge in the thinking that we would have now in current bridging without an additional layer of tech over the top of that.
Right.
But it would mean that the need for an oracle for a trustless bridge is not as necessary because the state proofs allow you to see cross-chain.
Right. Okay.
So it basically is a line of sight. So as a good example of where this could be interesting, so when I say it's not a bridge in the traditional sense, is the ability to then use like a state proof to simply port ETH to Algorand and trade it doesn't actually quite fit, because you could see it port doesn't mean you can control what happens to the ETH on the other side. So if you port it and sold it, the other person doesn't necessarily have control of it on the other side without building the mechanisms or framework around that transactional component. But where it does become super interesting is things like potential pricing, volume metrics, data, just general data from within the ecosystem, but also things like, if you think about the NFT gaming space, if you want to go into a metaverse on Ethereum, you could easily have your weapon, NFT, sword, avatar on Algorand and be able to load it in onto a metaverse in Ethereum and start using it, because you're not trading it. You just want it to be seen and known that it's yours so we can utilize it in a different chain. So that's a really good example of what that might look like. The other versions are where you can build out. So C3 is a good example that will you probably use state proofs to run its multi-chain structure, but it'll have that framework that allows the state proof to happen while still controlling the right elements of the transactional component for it to function, because it's going to be all this internal trading mechanism. So that, it's a good example of something that could use state proofs. I think Algomint could very well likely end up using them as a part of a more decentralized, trustless version of the bridge in the future. Though exactly how is still to be defined. And when I say that, it's not that they don't make sense. It's still trying to work out what is actually the best version, because another great example of state proofs at this stage won't work with Bitcoin on the native chain. So it's a good example of what is the solve there, because the smart contract capability is not necessarily live. I'm going into probably more detail than you intended here, Coop.
No, it's good.
But it likely is coming, whether Taproot or something else actually is a solve there. So there's still a lot of research. I don't think a lot of people realize how much effort has to go into making sure you're picking the right solution as well. That's a huge step in itself, because you want to get it right. Algorand's a great example. How long was blockchain around before Algorand was really able to come to fruition? Is a good example of what it really takes to design a truly interesting quality, future-proof technology.
Yeah. So will this is this tech exclusive to Algorand?
This was the brilliance of it. It's Algorand is the first to really do it. Like it's that's kind of the magic, which is also why it probably didn't receive the fanfare it deserves, because it is a brilliant leap in tech, and the fact that Q1 next year is likely when it will be live, which does seem like it is the case, is massive. So Q1 next year. Contract-to-contract calls, high capacity of data on chain, state proofs. Like there's so much coming, and I think this is the beauty of Algorand is it's not just promised a lot; it's been delivering, which is amazing.
Well, and that is it, and I think that that sometimes frustrates like the retail guys, because they're like, we want announcements, and Algorand doesn't really operate that way. They're like, we'll deliver, and I think to most people that are serious, that's a good way to be. So will the state proofs, is that going to eliminate the need for an oracle, or is that just just many cases?
No, look, it won't eliminate the need for an oracle. I think, and when I say that, it kind of depends on what data you want as well, because it'll show data on-chain data, it won't show off-chain data. So if you want the price of USD, you'd only be able to rely on the price of USDC or other prices that are already on chain. If you wanted weather data, you're probably in trouble trying to use state proofs. If you wanted like, Venue One's going to be doing synthetic sporting, not betting, but almost options. You need then off-chain data. So it'll remove the potentially need for certain types of oracle feeds, but not completely. I think we'll also probably find that the oracles will probably use state proofs as an additional channel of data. So it'll be an additional feed to aggregate and provide more data, to provide more accurate data.
And when it comes to Algorand currently, I feel like I've heard that like a decentralized oracle is coming to Algorand, but what is it? Just do we use? Is it Chainlink, or what's the oracle situation for Algorand right now?
So there's a native oracle coming, like an Algorand specific oracle coming, which is pretty exciting. I think there's a couple that are probably in that race at the minute. There's also non-native. So Chainlink has been talking about coming for a long time, but probably the big thing to understand with Chainlink coming. And so like Chainlink has a strong footing in Australia as well. There's a lot of teams that work closely with Chainlink, some literally down the road from me here, who run one of the optimizers and in the actual quality assessment tools to see what sort of data oracles are putting off and rates them. But the biggest issue with Chainlink, I think, for Algorand is, number one, to have an asset be actually deployed as like a certified asset with a certified feed on Chainlink. It's got to do more than 10 million volume a day, which means like every asset on Algorand other than Algo, USD, BTC, ETH, like just the current normal assets, wouldn't have a certified feed, which is a problem. That isn't actually that useful, because I would safely say every asset that launches as native Algorand assets for the next 12 months is unlikely to break that figure in mass on a regular basis early. So I think that'll be one of the key issues with Chainlink. So in theory, it is coming, but it'll be useful for some things, not useful for everything. But we will see. There's another one that's coming. I'm not sure if I meant to say who it is, but there is another one that's coming. So I better not, because I'm sure I'll get a message from someone saying you were telling me about that. But then I
do appreciate. I remember this from the last time we talked. It feels like you're always on the verge of revealing something you're not supposed to. So just from a dramatic standpoint, I appreciate it. So
I should just ask people when I get this information. I should be like, am I allowed to tell everyone, or is this like when's the date that it's no longer a secret? But the native oracles, I guess the benefit of native oracles, there's pluses and minuses to the native oracles. The plus is they will be far friendlier to delivering what products on Algorand want, because they'll be hungry and they're here early with the rest of the projects. So they will be working with them to go, what do you need? And it doesn't matter whether what they need is, the ultimate Chainlink style option. It's more about how do we grow the ecosystem collectively? How do we work together to build this space? The downside is that they are, they're less combat tested. They haven't had the same, years of quality results and, no downtime and no price feed issues and no wrong prices that have caused troubles. So, I think that'll just mean that there's a bit of an onus on the new oracles, the native oracles, proving that they are quality tech and they're going to deliver a sound, safe oracle to the ecosystem. The one in particular that I've become quite close with, like they've done a great job at actually designing some really, really interesting mechanisms that are, again, it applies all the learning of all the different oracles out there, and then adds in their own interesting elements that make it something that ideally is an innovation on what we've seen so far.
Right. So, I mean, you were saying you were dealing with them, and much of what's being built on Algorand is out of Australia, isn't it? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of ASAs in the Algorand ecosystem.
Yeah, look, there's a little bit of it. It's a fairly close community, the blockchain community in Australia as well. I think we've had some good champions in the space here as well. So I'd like to sort of say we are a quality champion for Algorand in Australia. We definitely, beat the drum fairly nonstop. No one said it's annoying, so hopefully no one is getting annoyed that we do that. So that's good.
I think that's the type of annoyance that is forgiven anyways. So whatever.
Yeah. And Jason Lee from the foundation was based here. He's based in Singapore now, but he was here for a long time and has a big Australian community. Silvio visited here before mainnet launch. So there was a fair bit of love for Algorand and Silvio in general here. I think where Meld Ventures in particular has played a role is we've really focused on taking people who are like, yeah, Algorand's really interesting and really cool. I love the tech too. You should build something. What do you need? Do you need funding? Do you need technical support? Do you need connections? Like, what are the pieces you would need as someone to build in this space? And that's where we probably really help take the leap. And thankfully, it's also, it's a ripple effect, because everyone we have convinced to build, they then talk to 50 other people, because it is a small community, and, it all compounds. We actually had lunch here in Brisbane yesterday, which there was about 30 of us that attended from Ethereum and Algorand and different ecosystems, and they're all founders. And a huge portion of them were Algorand builders, which was really exciting. But the nice part then, when we see that, that collective, and it's made up of so many Algorand builders, then you have the other builders that are at the table who are all friends that start to go, okay, I'm missing a beat here, because... Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. Do you have those Ethereum guys kind of being like, okay, like, wait a second, like, there's an opportunity.
100%. And look, I think because you know what it's like too, no one wants to be the only one as well. So when they're looking around and going, okay, there's a lot of great people here doing some brilliant work, we need to really consider, is this something we should be getting involved in? Which is great.
And it seems to me that the guys that it took courage from, like you and the people that were very early to Algorand, when there was no DeFi, there was, very little actually there yet. So it took courage for some people to do that. But now that, it's taken less and less courage, which is a great thing for it as a whole.
Exactly. Every good founder who starts building de-risks it for the next.
Exactly.
Like it's this, the compounding de-risking of coming to the space. And look, EVM compatibility is always sort of thrown out there as a problem. It's a problem today. It won't be a problem in 10 years. I think it's only a problem today because that's where most of the business is. I think it's kind of similar to when it was like, no, you still need to release a CD when digital music was really starting to become a thing. Sure, it was a problem at the time when still 90% of music sales were CDs, but it was a road bump to get over versus something that was going to dominate the narrative for life.
Well, yeah, I mean, and there was a time when with Netflix, you got DVDs in the mail and you were able to stream. And there was that time where they both, and then basically DVDs have kind of faded. So, there's always these transitions and
completely.
Yeah. So you, okay. So we're talking about Decipher. So the Hivemind, Borderless, state proofs. Then there was all the carbon negative talk and the climate Planet Watch and climate trade and all the stuff that they're doing there, which I think is very appealing to a mass adopt, like with governments and big institutions, obviously with all the ESG concerns. So that's a huge draw that I think that maybe crypto Twitter doesn't get all excited about, but I think when it comes to more and more institutional money coming into Algorand, I think that's a huge deal.
I was going to add to that, Coop, as well. Like, I think there is a pretty incredible team building an Algorand Metaverse, which is really exciting. Like, it's the project's going to be amazing. Like, I'm very pumped. I probably will not leave my house for 2 weeks, but I will in the sense I'll be in the metaverse, but won't in the physical sense. But you know,
what's the name of the team? What's the team?
Look, again, I'm sure I'm not meant to say, but as soon as I can, I'll double check and I'll let you know. But they're doing some incredible work. The stuff that they're thinking about is just that next leap. So this is a team that's done incredible work in these kind of products, not in blockchain. So I think it's going to be brilliant to see what is, you know, one of the world's leading teams designing these kind of products actually apply it to blockchain is going to be brilliant. And in particular, applying it inside the Algorand space. But I think what's really sort of interesting about this, and the DAO chat sort of was where I really wanted to kind of dig into this. And, you know, time limits make it almost impossible with those kind of panels. But, you know, it's also the things that are going to help us, number one, really dig into what governance should look like, because we haven't solved the governance problem in thousands of years as a society. We're not going to solve it today. But things like the metaverse allow these things to be iterated and tested at speed, because everything is so nimble, everything can be adjusted, everything can be tried and tested in large distributed communities in a really short period of time. So I think that's one interesting thing that we'll see from metaverses that we probably don't account for now, because a lot of the metaverses aren't applying that same sort of thinking. But this is the kind of problems we need to be working on within a metaverse. But on top of that, I think the carbon element will be really interesting as well. You know, one of the strange things, if you think about what it's like to have an artwork on your wall, that all the actual environmental impact of actually owning a physical artwork and getting the frame and all the byproducts of all the packaging materials that came around, all the different bits and the nails and everything, you know, you start to look at what that means in a metaverse, and the carbon that's saved will be really interesting. But this team in particular is talking a lot about how they relate that carbon footprint element and how that connects from metaverse to real world. And I think we will see some really cool stuff come out of them about what that correlation could be. And they've got some really interesting ideas, which look, the brilliant part about blockchain as well, I'm rambling here, Coop, but the brilliant part about blockchain, I'm interested. The brilliant part about blockchain as well is that it is the ability to start from scratch. You know, it's the ability to go, all right, push the rules out the door. Let's just go crazy here. What's the craziest thing we could do? Because in reality, if we are going to take leaps forward in terms of how things are done and how we operate, the craziness is what's needed to take a genuine leap.
Well, yeah. And I mean, when you start thinking about virtual realities and metaverse and where you can build things from scratch, you know, just think about being even like an architect or, you know, a builder. Like you're building, you can build it and then it can be different tomorrow if you want. Like there's just so much flexibility that, you know, and it's hard, I think, even for me, it's hard for me to even kind of conceptualize what that is even going to be. I mean, is this, even when you said what you said, maybe I'd like to wind back to when you were talking about governance. And so what you're saying with that is that because the metaverse is going to be able to allow us to kind of congregate from a lot of different places, and that you think, so explain what you mean by how the metaverse will, maybe in more layman's terms, how that is going to help governance.
Yeah, and look, not probably to get too philosophical on you, though I'm perfectly willing to. So please take that apology with a grain of salt.
If I don't understand, I'll just ask.
Yeah, cool. So not to get too philosophical on you, but for me, I always sort of think about what governance means at a low level, you know, and I think about it in like the family context, in like my friendship groups, you know, in the business context of like people who I work with and collaborate with. What does governance look like? And in reality, governance governance feels, let me start again. In that context, when you look at governance, it's all about the people you know, what you understand about them, what you appreciate about them, what you understand their skills to be, and what they are as a person. And what that means is you can actually decide who you want to trust with what information or what tasks. So you can go, you know what, Robert is incredible at problem solving and tokenomics, and has an amazing mind for that kind of thinking. I want to trust him with direction for us as a business or as a community on that particular topic. Or I really trust Rebecca with education of my children because I think she's got this incredible soul and spirit, and she would be such an amazing mentor for my children, and she's such an incredible educator. She should definitely be our leader in terms of educating the next generation. I think that is what governance should look like. We should actually know the people who we are trusting with this responsibility, because in reality, for real governance to be effective, they need to actually be responsible and be genuine decision makers. And that should be based on our belief that they are the best option for us to do that this is the right person to make these decisions. And, I imbue them with all my trust and faith that they are the better person to do this, because they're better than me at it. And so I think they should be making the decision versus me, and they're going to be able to dedicate the time to understand it better. And, I think this should be how we step forward. In modern day governance, I don't know any of the people in charge. I've got no idea what they're like. Even if I had lunch with them, I'd have no idea what they're really like. Like, it wouldn't be enough time to genuinely appreciate someone. And this is the key issue, is we've become so different and so distant from our leaders that is why the system doesn't work as well as it should. In something like the metaverse, where you can actually meet up with people that are like-minded. I actually talk about this a little bit, the like-minded piece, because I think if you live in a city, generally you and your neighbors don't have a lot in common, in a whole range of aspects. If you live in a town of 500, you have quite a lot in common with the people there. You've found your way to this place because of a set of commonalities that not everyone has the same feeling towards. No one ends up in a small town unless there is some real alignment with your community. And so I think that the metaverse allows us to find those communities from a city, from a city of millions. You can actually find your community, your people inside the metaverse. And the reason why that'll be important for governance is, number one, in a metaverse setting, the ability to get to know someone on a different level digitally becomes possible, because everything from the way they present themselves as an avatar to the way they interact to the way they do things in a meetup inside the metaverse will help you understand who they are. And I think this is all the step forward to working out what governance would look like, and how do you build up, I call it, how do you build up the elders of your community? How do you decide? An elder is not relative to age. Elder is relative to experience, knowledge, capability on a certain topic. How do we find our elders in the community? Because they're the people who are really going to be responsible for what this next stage of governance looks like in these kind of communities. And I think the metaverse allows us to run that experiment at speed, and different variations of it, because we're going to see different models of governance across different communities, whether that be a hardcore Algoana collector community, or whether that be a community about, promoting carbon awareness inside the metaverse, or inside the digital space. So, I think that's where we're going to see that difference really come in.
Yeah, and you just kind of made me think about how the potential of the metaverse is in connecting us more. I mean, the internet obviously connects us, but there's a distance, and of course there's a distance behind, when you can just type whatever you want. You don't reveal really anything other than either intelligence, maybe some humor, but most of the time you're just kind of revealing that you're not scared because you're protected and people are trolls and all that. So, but with the fact that you're going to have an avatar that's going to represent you, you're going to be, your voice is potentially going to be there, all these different things. It has the potential for the small town. And I'm starting to realize that maybe I don't have to live in Los Angeles for very much longer. I mean, I'm getting a little excited about that.
I think since COVID, especially not.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
And I think you're spot on, Coop, too, because the other big one, too, when you're typing in Telegram or typing in Reddit or Discord, it is a more considered answer as well. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm sure plenty of people do it. They type it, then they delete it, and then they retype it, or they rejig it, or they edit it after they've sent it. It's a really common thing, which is fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It makes sense. It's what you naturally would do.
Yeah.
But it's getting, and that doesn't matter if we aren't talking about governance. I think that's less important. I think when we start to talk about the idea that we do want DAO infrastructure, we do want this community ownership and governance of so much of what the future is, we need these things to start to be really tested and experimented and find models that work, because the classic democratic system of just everyone votes via token is not going to work, because number one, are we going to KYC every human being and say, all right, everyone gets one vote? Is it going to be on tokens where then with money you could buy more votes?
Right.
Also, traditionally, we've already seen it in Ethereum, the full democratic model doesn't tend to work, because the problem is 60 plus 70, 80, 90% of the voters don't actually understand what they're voting on, which means their votes aren't as well considered as they should be, which is not any fault of their own. Who's going to go and study up for 2 weeks on a particular topic to be able to make the right decision? And this is why we need to be able to find ways to identify genuine leaders and the people who are genuinely capable of guiding us in different areas. And we need to be able to know them in a way that we can trust them to do that, because that's the only way it'll be allowed to happen without there being the same problems we see in governance today. Interestingly enough, the project Polynize, Mars and Sharov, two brilliant guys out of Australia, out of Melbourne, they're doing some really fascinating work, which is the ability to almost, it's not this, but it has this application in many ways for what something like this might look like, which is almost like this personality, not IQ, but this sort of testing of, what you are like as a person, where you're capable, where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are. Like, you can almost get this sort of profile of how capable you would be at certain things, and they're the kind of things that are going to be the first experiments or the first, testing of how some of these things might come into place, because the easy way to develop reputation and trust is time, but often that's not a luxury we have in the digital sphere. So things like Polynize will help us do that faster. Right.
Now, when you talked about that personality test, it reminded me when I was about 20 years old, I was walking in San Francisco and I was very stoned. And my buddy, we walked by this beautiful building and it said free personality test, right? And my buddy was like, hey, let's go in there. So we go in there and it's a Scientology building. And they sit us in these rooms and it was like a 250 question test. It was so large. It was so long. And my friend was really funny. He freaked out. He ran, like he was 6'8", and this was a massive building. And I'll never forget the image of this very tall man, not very coordinated, sprinting across like this marble floor. And then them trying to, anyways. Okay, so it's not Scientology. This is not your.
No. Look, definitely not.
Okay, definitely not Scientology. All right. So yeah, I mean, because the governance thing and the voting thing is a something that we have decentralized governance in Algorand, and it's it's problematic, because it can be problematic just because if you own a lot of algo, you have more sway, and it seems like there's a bit of sniping even in our last vote. It's like almost like these guys waited because they knew they were going to be able to tilt it or whatever way. I don't know if that's what happened, but there's just an out. And that's something that I've been trying to figure, in my own, not so evolved thinking on this, but it's like, how do you do that without KYC? Like, okay, maybe you get rid of these massive whales and you can only stake up to a certain amount of tokens to keep it, more equitable, but still you're going to need KYC in order to do that. So yeah, I don't understand the answers to those questions, but
yeah, look, and I think identity is a whole nother problem. Like this is the fascinating pieces. There's so many big issues to solve, and I think the biggest issue with KYC in its current format is that not everyone can actually do one. A great example, like near Australia is PNG. If anyone's familiar with the country PNG, Papua New Guinea, for example, a majority of the population can't complete a traditional KYC. They haven't got the documentation to do it, which means they're excluded from huge amounts that require KYC. And look, to be clear, Algomint has KYC, at the moment. It's a functioning product, though, in the sense that we do one to allow use of the bridge, but it's not ideal. There's so many, not ideal in the sense there's problems with KYC. So not that I necessarily have an issue with KYC in itself if it's done in the right format, which is you don't want your information being shared. You don't want all this kind of stuff. It's more about signifying and positioning your reputation against what you're doing in the digital sphere. It's that we need to solve what is recognized as something acceptable as a KYC, which is how do you identify the unidentified? And so whether that is going to be possible, I don't know. And I think the reason I say I don't know, it's because we as the blockchain community need to find solutions to these problems, because the powers that be inside the traditional finance world are going to come, the regulators are going to come, and they're going to say it's a requirement that some of these things happen. And so we need to find a good solution that can meet that problem before they try to make one for us. Because the version that will be made for us will not be the version any of us want.
Exactly.
And that's the biggest issue. I think there'll still be ways that there'll still be plenty of things you don't require KYC for. I think that'll still exist, but it's going to become more limited. And you can imagine, even if, let's just say, the Australian government said you had to do it every time someone touched anything in crypto, there's such a huge community. Australia's got the biggest per capita blockchain building community in the world. So it's got, one of the strongest communities building in blockchain. So it would immediately just change so much of what's being built. So, I'm optimistic that we will find something that's right, that is the right fit for where we want to be. But, time will tell.
Okay, well, I just looked at that. I'm like, at some point, we probably should talk about Algomint and.
I think it's what we were meant to talk about. We've got sidetracked.
That is why I reached out. But okay, so early on here, you talked about, and which I didn't know. So you've been working with Algorand since the very beginning, basically, and it started with, and we'll talk briefly about this. It started with Meld, right? And with Meld, what you're doing, what you've done is, now you had mentioned this earlier, but it's you're tokenizing gold, correct? That's
correct. So technically tokenizing precious metals. So gold, silver, platinum, the whole kit. I think the really big. So we were one of the first products to ever launch on Algorand, the first functioning products to go to mainnet. The product actually gets a huge amount of usage, but on the traditional side. Essentially what we've done is we've digitized the supply chain, which is not on chain, but it's a full digitizing of the entire supply chain. The reason for it is, for gold ever to truly be a currency again, whether it be digital or physical form, it needs efficiency, because without efficiency, it becomes too costly to do anything with. You could kind of think about it like Bitcoin gas fees. You have this huge cost of transacting that isn't viable. So streamlining it was a necessity.
And then also, not to mention the fact that you can't spend pieces of gold and
exactly. Exactly. And so what we've built now essentially is a fully functioning quality supply chain ecosystem on the physical side. It includes MKS PAMP, which is the biggest gold trader in the world. Heraeus is one of the biggest in Asia. Perth Mint, which is one of the biggest in the world. Melbourne Mint, so a huge network of quality companies that are now connected into Algorand. What that'll mean is when there becomes utility for gold, so when it actually starts to be able to be utilized as a currency, when you start to be able to borrow against it, when you start to be able to yield farm it, that's when we'll really see that side come to life. So we've been fully aware that we needed to build out the back end to allow the digital side, when the time is right, to actually grow. So we're really well positioned for that now, and we'll hopefully now, with everything happening in the space, and as we see some of the money markets come online, we'll start to see that become really possible, which will be brilliant. So that was the first product, and it was brilliant to. It was also very hard to launch back then. The iterations in the tech were even less. So it was fun.
Yeah, and so will there be, or is there like an exchange, like a Meld exchange, or is that? How does that work?
So they'll be listed on Tinyman first. I think we'll see gold and silver available there very soon, which will then follow with Pact and some of the other exchanges that are coming out. There's also a few other pieces coming in terms of where you'll be able to borrow against it. So you'll likely end up being able to borrow against it at things like Folks and XBacked as time goes on, which will also create something really interesting as well, especially considering a lot of them will have some really great incentive programs. So the ability to borrow against gold and put USD or algo into yield farming techniques, so you could really maximize your return without giving up your gold holding, I think will be really interesting. The other piece I talk about a lot is, a lot of people don't appreciate this, but investing in crypto is a luxury. It genuinely is. Like, you you can't be earning a living wage and speculatively invest in crypto. It's just you can, but it's extraordinarily risky and dangerous because for most people, a living wage means they earn enough to live, and putting that at risk is a real problem. So I think if we really want to see the world adopt digital and adopt blockchain-based assets, something like gold, number one, is the globally most accepted asset by far, by a long shot in the world. And secondly, I think in terms of an asset, it's got thousands upon thousands of years of understanding and stability, and it makes sense as the stable asset of choice for people to utilize for their everyday, secure, stable earnings to survive. It makes sense as an asset class that would work in the digital sphere for that. Some would say USD. I just am not a fan of the system that is fiat. So for me, it's the most accepted and liquid asset for sure, but I don't think it's the right asset for that kind of use.
So do you consider yourself a gold bug? Are you a gold bug?
Look, I suppose a gold bug in that I believe it's the better or the best stable asset that is the best suited to be adopted globally. At least for now. Like, I think crypto is going through a huge price discovery phase that will not stop anytime soon. We aren't going to see asset stability for a long time. So I'm not a gold bug in the sense of I think it should be a one and only investment and just stack gold to the roof. I'm sure I'm not meant to say that. I'm sure I'm meant to say everyone buy as much gold as you can. But in reality, I think it plays its role in a portfolio and plays its role in society in what I think will be this next generation.
Yeah, I'm a big Bitcoin fan, and I'm also a gold fan. And one of the things that kind of irritates me with some of the most high profile Bitcoin holders, they'll go on Twitter and then they'll talk about how much more Bitcoin has gone up over the last 5 years or whatever like that. And it always seems so kind of like it's like you're omitting something that's very important to that argument. And the fact that gold has been around forever, and it is. And by the way, it is up since those 5 years or 10 years or whatever it is. But that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to hold its value. It's not supposed to go up and then fall down, So in my opinion, gold is doing its job. And if Bitcoin didn't exist, I'm sure in these times it would be much higher. But
and look, I'm a fan of Bitcoin as well, completely. So I'm certainly, I'm probably unlike them. I would never go out and say one is better than the other. I think they both have their role, and I think you're spot on. I think for a lot of where I sort of see it is when you feel like the market is turbulent or it's a bear market, that's when you should probably sit in gold, because it's a safe place to sit. And exactly like you said, it's meant to hold its value. It's meant to be that. They often call it in times of turbulence, traditionally, it's a preserver of wealth. It's what you go to if you're worried about what's happening in the world. Because if the world looks like it's in trouble financially, gold is unlikely to go down. It might go up, maybe not by a huge amount, but the big thing is it's more likely to be neutral or positive versus negative in times of turbulence. So, it is that wealth preserver. It is meant to hold its value. And it's kind of why it also makes sense as that stable asset that would be the everyday asset for most people to utilize in their everyday lives. Right.
I know. And it's been sort of disappointing to me just a little bit with Bitcoin when all the inflation concerns are, it kind of reacts like a stock, like a risky stock rather than a store of value that is reacting to inflation concerns by being that kind of safe haven. But
And the gold has so much liquidity too. So it has complete liquidity. It trades at the same value everywhere in the world. It is the right asset. And also, look, the big thing too is gold has genuine utility. It has genuine real world use. It has chemical properties that can't be replicated. So it'll never be gone. Like it'll never leave. But what form it takes in the future, I think is the differentiating point from what it's doing right now.
Right. Okay. So then Algomint.